Welcome back to the Cycle Starters podcast, where we explore ancestral healing, generational patterns, astrology, pleasure as transformative medicine, and the powerful cycles we're creating for future generations. I'm your host, Heather Rebecca Wilson, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Leah Vanderlinden, a remarkable healer with over 2 decades of experience in mental health and behavioral health. Leah brings a unique blend of expertise as a certified trauma release breathwork practitioner, Reiki Master, and spiritual coach. She's been leading an online spiritual community for nearly a decade, helping thousands of people worldwide on their healing journeys. In this episode, we'll dive deep into Leah's own ancestral healing journey, explore the patterns she's breaking, and discuss the new cycles she's creating in her lineage. From inner child healing to epigenetics, Leah's integrative approach offers valuable insights for anyone interested in transformational healing work. If you are loving this content, please remember to like, subscribe, comment, and share to support the channel and our growing community of cycle starters and cycle breakers. And if you'd like to receive my weekly newsletter and enjoy 10% off most of my offerings, join my new free healing community, the Cycle Starters Sanctuary, where ancestral healing, astrology, and pleasure converge for conscious evolution and generational empowerment. Go to heatherrebeccawilson.com/sanctuary to learn more. If you're ready to go deeper, you can join our monthly membership, the Astro Ancestral Healing Collective, for a more enhanced experience with new moon pleasure practices and dance parties, plus monthly guest expert workshops. So let's begin our conversation with Leah Vanderlinden and explore the powerful intersection of ancestral wisdom and modern healing practices. Welcome, Leah.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you are here. Thank you for saying yes to doing this. I really appreciate it.
It is an honor, and shout out to Alex for inviting me. I'm so excited to be a part of this.
I know Alex brought us together. I'm
She
so
did.
grateful for her and
You.
for putting us together. So I'm
Me
excited.
too.
I'm excited to be talking today.
Yes.
Well, so let's start with ancestors and ancestry. So, what do you feel comfortable sharing about your ancestral background?
Yeah. So this question's always fun because, to be honest, as a kid, I didn't know a ton about it. I knew a little bit, and then as I've gotten older, I've just had this hunger to want to learn more about my roots, right? A lot of us know so much about all the dysfunction in our ancestry, but we don't really know about all the resilience and all about what it took to get here and who they had to unbecome and become throughout that process. My roots are all over the board. So we've got some from Germany. So my grandmother on my mom's side was from Germany. And then my grandfather on her side, both of his parents were from Sicily and they were immigrants from Sicily. And then my grandfather on my dad's side was from Holland and they were immigrants from there as well. And then my grandma on that side is a mix of European. So I love how they're just kind of this diverse group, but they did come here just carrying a lot of their traditions from where they came from, but then creating their own and then just pushing through a lot of barriers along the way.
Beautiful. I love it. All right. Well, I'm curious, when did this idea of ancestral healing, right? When did the concept of generational patterns, intergenerational patterns enter your consciousness? Like, when did you realize that, oh, this is a thing?
So I think my answer has kind of two parts to that. It's been something my whole life, even as a kid, where I've just felt like I was born to be a lot different than my family, if that makes sense, and the one to kind of come in and to break a lot of cycles that I knew that my family was ready to shed and to leave behind, and that there was a lot of things that they no longer wanted to carry, and I would be the one to kind of implement those. I've always felt different, if that makes sense. But then in my career, when I worked with youth and at risk youth, I started noticing that a lot of the things they were carrying were not their own. They were belief systems they inherited through their parents, through their grandparents, through their communities. And as I was learning those things with them, I was learning a lot about myself too, right? A lot of patterns were just things that I learned from my mom or from my dad, and they weren't really mine. So there became this deep desire to learn a lot about how to break these things, but also how to embrace them. And that's when I went down this rabbit hole of epigenetics and then the inner child and then generational healing. And I've never gotten out. So I learned a lot through that, through a lot of self reflection, through a lot of just learning how to rewire the brain, rewire the belief systems, and it's spiraled into this beautiful manifestation that's gotten to be a big part of my career too.
I love it. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah, I know it
So,
was a lot.
no, it's not a lot. It's all beautiful and powerful. I want to highlight this word that you brought up, which is so really central to ancestral healing, and I think it's a relatively new field, and you mentioned epigenetics.
Hmm.
So, I think most people do not realize that ancestral trauma is passed down through DNA as cellular memories. What
Hmm.
can you tell our viewers and our listeners about epigenetics, just like as a little introduction? If you were explaining this to a young person, what would you say the role of epigenetics in ancestral?
Ooh, challenge accepted. So let me try to think of how to break that down. So it's a fancy way of saying it's the study, right, of how our environment, like you talked about, how experiences and even emotions can really influence basically your gene expression without really changing the DNA in itself. So when you think of your DNA kind of like a book, the words like your genetic code, they kind of stay the same, but then with epigenetics, it's like a highlighter, marking the parts of the book to get that great read. And it's also about how your book can kind of be influenced by trauma. It can be influenced by stress, by mental health, by diet, by lifestyle, by emotional healing, and then even personal growth. So if you think of a belief, let's say that your mom was always terrified to drive. So every time she drove, her body got tense, right? She white knuckled the steering wheel, and you were the kid in the car, and you could kind of always see mom's pattern change a little bit when she was driving. And then as an adult, when you drive, you've got this feeling come over you of all this tension, and you've got this feeling of kind of a fear of driving, and you don't really know where it comes from. It's a simple thing like that. It's these beliefs that you inherit, that you continue to carry on without even realizing. And it's even, into your finances. If your grandparents grew up where there was always this financial struggle, and so they began to act in that way and act in that mindset. And then you don't know why you carry these same beliefs around money. They've been passed down from generation to generation to generation and almost written in your DNA because they've continuously been repeated. Does that make sense? So as you've continued to go on and you start to realize these aren't your own, and then you decide to break through from those, you almost rewire your brain and rewire your DNA to where this is no longer a part of you, no longer a part of your bloodline. And it's now this new belief system that you're creating and instilling in your bloodline.
Leah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think that this is so new for a lot of people. They've never heard of epigenetics, they've never heard of ancestral healing. It never
Hmm.
occurred to them that things could be passed down, behaviors and, gifts can be passed down too, right? Resilience can be passed down,
Absolutely.
right? Positive things can be passed down, but wounding does pass down as well. I love to always mention that study they did at Emory University. I think it was like, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago at this point, where they exposed all these lab rats to that scent of cherry blossom. And then
Mhm.
they gave them like a little electrical shock at the same time that they were smelling that scent. And then these poor lab rats, but maybe 3 generations, 4 generations later, they exposed the descendants of those rats to that same scent, but without the shock. But
Mhm.
those rats, because of what their ancestors had been through, had the same
Absolutely.
reaction to the scent,
Yep.
even though there was no shock and they had never witnessed, their parents or grandparents go through it. It was just in their DNA. So this is so real. This is a
It's
real
so
thing.
real. It's so
Yeah.
real. It shows up in everything. It shows up in your
Yeah.
career. It shows up in love. It shows up in your relationships. Shows up in everything. And so, just as we talked about, those negative things can be passed down through all those generations, like the struggle and the fear and the emotional wounds and all of that, and show up even in your body as health issues and things that you carry. All that trauma can be inherited, but just like you talked about, so can healing. And so when we do this inner work, and I think that's why I love it so much, whether it's through the therapy, through breath work, through breaking toxic patterns, or even just having these conversations like we are today, like we talked about, we're rewiring our genes. So now that our genes are expressing themselves and breaking these cycles in a way that they haven't been before.
I know. It's an exciting time to be alive. And I really feel like anybody who's drawn to my work or your work, it's not an accident. That's
No.
actually part of their sole purpose, their divine mission in this incarnation to actually be the cycle breaker in their family.
Absolutely, because you know as well as I do, being a cycle breaker or being the black sheep of the family is not easy. It's often hard because you're the first one. So there's no rule book on how to do it. There's no one to show you how to do it. So it's often kind of lonely and isolating while you're breaking all these cycles in the beginning until you get to the other side of it for sure.
Yeah, and that's why I feel it's so important to do this with other people, right? You need to have
A
support, you need
community.
to have community, you need to be able to express yourself, talk things out. Yeah, support is absolutely key. So you do a lot of supporting of others in your work. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you do currently and also your journey getting here?
Yeah. So, okay. You got all day? Am I allowed to cuss?
Yes.
Because this shit's been exhausting. Honestly, baby, life has led me here. And it was just this constant cycle of knowing I was more than just a feeling of depression. At first, it was really just me trying to figure out my own healing, trying to break through and break free from a lot of my own patterns that were leading me into a life that I didn't want to live. And then also kind of just trying to make sense of all this stuff that I was carrying that just I didn't understand why I was carrying it. And then starting to realize that everything that I was learning and everything that I was beginning to heal, like we talked about, it was just so much deeper than just for me. It was so my son didn't carry these same beliefs. So my niece didn't carry these. And honestly, so my mom could also stop carrying a lot of this because she also had a lot of guilt for things that I inherited through her. And I didn't want to have that same guilt with my son. And so that's when I started knowing like, not only is this work my purpose, but it's also my purpose to heal myself and to really hold that space for people to just feel like they weren't alone. When I first got into this journey, it was really through work. Like we talked about, I was working with at risk youth at the time, and a lot of them were waiting trial to go into the judicial court system. And so a lot of them were brought up in these situations where they were products of their surroundings and products of old belief systems. And I noticed that they would get help. They would get this professional help from therapists. They would also get on medication and they would do okay for about a year or so. And then without fail, they would go back to these patterns of self-destruction, self-sabotage. And so I started asking my boss at the time, I was like, I know this is some like hippie shit, but can I do mirror work with them? And so it started there. We started diving into Louise Hay's practices of doing mirror work and then creating affirmations and then doing breath work. And it really just kind of dug into this beautiful cycle of how to create new neural pathways in the brain so that the medicine they were taking could actually work, so that the therapy they were receiving could actually stick. And that's where it really started. And then it started to turn itself into its own career separately from that career at the time, too.
Amazing. I mean, I love this story. You've shared it with me before, and I wanted to
Yes.
make sure you could share it with our community. I think
Mhm.
it's so inspiring, and I think it also speaks to how when you're really trying to experience a change in your reality, you have to change on all levels of your being, right? And
Absolutely.
I feel like what you gave to these youth, right, at this really just crazy time in their lives, and God knows what they had been through before you met them, but what you added was a spiritual aspect to this transformational process, right? Because especially in the collective, in my membership, we do not spiritually bypass the body because you got to
Thank you.
heal on all levels, right? You
You
can't just
have
read a
to.
book about trauma and then heal your
No.
trauma, right? It's
No.
mental, it's emotional, it's physical, and it's spiritual. And I think what
Absolutely.
you brought to the table, in addition to all the scientific database, things you were offering, you are also offering a sacred space for them to have a spiritual healing. So, thank
And
you
they
for
Thank
saying yes to
you.
that work.
And they did it for me too. I mean, I know you know this, but when you work with people who have went through any kind of trauma, it never fails. God gives you somebody that's going through the same thing that you still haven't healed from. And in many ways, they teach you how to heal that within yourself as you're helping them.
I know, it's beautiful. It's
It
really,
really
really
is.
beautiful to do what it is that we do, and it's also confronting, right? I
Girl.
find when I am doing a training for other space holders, I always have to tell them, whatever is unhealed in you will show up in your circle. And that's a good thing and a bad thing, right? Because you learn from that, right?
Mhm.
Like you learn and you grow from that, but then you really have to take a lot of personal responsibility, radical self-responsibility, because you don't want to re-traumatize people who have come to you for healing. So we
Thank you
got to
for
do
saying
our
that.
own work. We have to do our own work. Otherwise, we're not holding spaces that are like truly for healing. So, it's
Exactly.
it's not for the faint of heart to either to like be on this journey, but also to be a space holder. You have to be prepared for all the things that come into your field, which are ultimately for your growth and expansion. You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know that.
So, I want to talk a little bit more about your own ancestral healing journey. So, what would you say are the patterns that you are actively dissolving, transmuting, alchemizing in this life?
Once again, do we have all day?
We have time. We have time.
Because this is deep. Okay. So I'm just going to probably go down a rabbit hole here.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I
Ready.
would say, okay, good. So I would say, about my ancestral healing journey right now, I think it's been a huge mix of deep grief. I don't think people realize how much grieving you have to do when you're going through your ancestral healing, but also just deep gratitude. As I'm letting a lot of those things go, I'm learning a lot of new things as well that I didn't see when I was only seeing through the eyes of trauma. So, just grieving what was lost, grieving things that were stolen from me in my childhood, things that were never spoken about, secrets, that we have to carry, but also this overwhelming gratitude for the love and the wisdom and the resilience that I did have to the best of their abilities. A big one for me was coming from this long line of depression and then coming from this line of losing my father to suicide, losing one of my aunts to suicide and saying as a single mom going through some really deep depression and taking a stance at one point to just go, okay, before this gets even deeper, this cycle has to end with me. So, just really diving into the journey of exploring what mental health healing for me looks like, because it's a lot different than it was for my family, and really diving into these natural healing processes and just really learning firsthand about things that I ignored that I really needed to address once again for not only just my mission, but just for my family also breaking through from addiction and self destruction and just the settling for survival instead of thriving. My family had a lot of great success stories, but a lot of it was just settling, right? And so I knew these patterns, especially when it came to relationships and with the women, that these patterns were running really deep in my lineage. And I just didn't want to repeat them learning how to rewrite them so that my son and my niece also could really learn what healthy love looks like, starting from self love. And another big one for me is generational poverty. And I'm still working on this one. I have not mastered this one,
Mhm. Mhm.
but being one of the first to really also break through this belief that women deserve bare minimum, like bare minimum efforts in your career and what you're paid, bare minimum efforts when it comes to friendships and dating and always this self-sacrifice. So really working on that. And then the biggest one for me has been relationships and settling for less because that's a lot of what I saw. And so really learning what love looks like and what it doesn't look like for me.
Goodness. Thank you for sharing all of that. And
Of course.
so sorry for your losses. My goodness. I mean, that's a lot to have gone through. Yeah, thank you for sharing that because I know that there are people in our community, there are going to be people who are listening and watching this who can relate and are going to feel really seen by what you shared. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's just important. I mean, I think all of us, right? We have these parts of our story that we're not the most proud of and that are really heavy, but I think it's just knowing that we don't just break cycles, we can build new ones. And healing isn't just about, stopping the pain, but it's about really creating something that's better in its place. Just like we talked about these conversations we're having, they're doing that. They're creating this healing. They're creating this new conversation to come in and these new belief systems to come in.
I love it. I love it. Well, so I want to shift the conversation slightly because you know that my monthly membership for female bodied cycle breakers really engages with not only pleasure as transformative medicine, but astrology as transformative medicine. For me, it's like I wouldn't be where I'm at right now without the support of astrology insofar as I find it to be such a helpful language and a framework for understanding yourself as an energetic being,
Yes.
and empowering yourself as an energetic being, but also as somebody on an ancestral healing journey, because it really shows in your chart what your ancestral wounds are, but also what the gifts are that your ancestors gave you. Right. What
So
is your
true.
deepest core wound, which is often ancestral, but when you are able to transmute it, what your healing powers are. So I really
Mhm.
find it to be just so amazing as a scaffolding to kind of hang your ideas on so that you can build from it. So that's the way I relate to astrology. And so, with
Love
that in
that.
mind, I wanted to see if you felt comfortable sharing your sun, moon, and rising sign with our listeners and our viewers.
Absolutely. I'm excited you asked that. Okay. So I'm a Pisces sun, if you
Mhm.
if you can't tell, a Libra moon, and then a
Nice.
Capricorn rising.
Okay. Pisces sun, that is mutable water. Libra moon, that's cardinal air. And then
Mhm.
what's your rising again?
Capricorn.
Capricorn rising. Okay, so that's cardinal earth. All right. Okay, so we have a nice balanced mix there. Where do we even begin with all of this? I
You
mean,
tell me.
yeah. Okay. So let's talk about this Pisces sun. Yeah. The sun is where you shine. It is the special sauce that you mix into everything that you do that makes you stand out from all the 11 other astrological signs. And each sign is just a spectrum of psycho spiritual energy with a high expression and a low expression. So Pisces, like I said, is mutable water, and water as an element is really about emotions and feelings. And so my feeling is all of the water signs are incredibly psychic and intuitive. Hello. This is the work that you're doing. You are shining here. But Pisces is also really imaginative, really creative, really artistic, and has the biggest heart. They're so compassionate. They're very spiritual. And I would say, even among all the water signs, I feel like Pisces is the most multidimensional. I feel like the veil is so, so thin for Pisces, and you can be in different dimensions at once. I mean, it's really, really wild. So that is super cool. And, considering what you do, this makes perfect, perfect sense. And you have a very loving vibe about you too. So
Thank you.
totally makes
So do
sense.
you.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. And then, okay. So Libra moon, you said?
Yes.
A Capricorn rising. Okay. So let's talk about the Libra moon because it actually has some similarities to the Pisces
It does.
sun in a way. So your moon in your natal chart is your emotions, but it's also your emotional inheritance, i.e., ancestral wounds, but also the gifts that your ancestors have given you. And
Mhm.
so Libra is, like I said, cardinal air, and air represents our thoughts, our beliefs, our consciousness, our communication, right? It's very mental, but it's also ruled by Venus, the goddess of love, money, and pleasure. And so Libra is very concerned with harmony and creating beauty and
Yes.
creating balance and is very concerned with justice, right? Like hearing both
Mhm.
sides of the story. That is the strength of Libra. And then also, there's a shadow side of it or a lower
Yes.
expression of Libra where you can be so indecisive, right? And you don't want to, you don't speak your mind. You don't voice your feelings and your thoughts because you don't want to rock the boat, right? You prioritize the peace of the group over your own well being. So how do you care for your emotional life? Look at you hiding. How do you how do you care for your emotional life with this Libra moon and also leaving in you're a space holder, right? You're a guide for other people. So how do you care for your emotional life?
Oh, I will fully admit it took me a long time to learn how to do this, and I'm still learning.
Mhm.
Very grateful I have friends like Alex that tell me all about my chart and all about my emotional waves and remind me often to check in with my emotional wave and my emotional authority. But most of it, to be honest, I have to schedule time for myself. I schedule time to literally answer no phone calls, not give any advice that day, but Friday nights are my nights for Leah. I just tap into me. I do my rituals that night. I go on my walks that night. And I try not to ever plan anything on those nights if I can avoid it to really be able to tap into me. Breath work is a big one for me. It's something I do every single day, even if it's only 5 minutes, because it allows me in many ways to almost make space to be able to be a space for others. And then another big one is constantly working on reprogramming my brain and my limiting beliefs. Because sometimes with that Pisces heart and that Libra heart, you can attract people that can kind of take advantage of that. So it's also doing a lot of affirmations and to speaking intentions in the life that I want. And that's a part of my daily practice too. So
I
that helps
love
with my
that.
boundaries.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense that using words, using affirmations, and reprogramming yourself mentally because Libra is very intellectual. You do a lot of mental processing,
And over analyzing.
Yeah, right. Because you're like, there's this side of the story, and then there's this side, right? And you can just like go back and forth and kind of be locked in a limbo, I think, with that.
Yes.
Yeah. What were you going to say?
I think it's also having friends that are different than you.
Mhm.
I have friends that are not as emotional as me that can really think things logically and think things for exactly what they are. So if I find myself being extremely emotional or taking on everyone else's emotions, I run those past my friends that are a little bit differently than me so I can think outside the box too. That helps
Nice.
me a lot. Yeah.
So many nuggets of wisdom from you.
Cute.
I appreciate this. So, Miss Capricorn rising.
What queen? You
They
about to come for me again? Do
Miss
I need a
Capricorn
shield?
rising. Okay, so I'm going to back up. The rising sign is your perception of reality. The vehicle for your divine mission. When people first
Mhm.
meet you, they pick up on your rising sign qualities.
They
And the
do.
reason an astrologer like me will ask for your birth time is because this is how we know what your rising sign is because the rising sign changes like every hour and a half, every 2 hours. And so you picked this on the other side. You decided to come into this life as a Capricorn rising. And like I said, Capricorn is cardinal earth. Earth is what we use to build the structures that give us stability and security in our lives. And when an element is in that cardinal modality, the initiating thrust of that element. So it's very, very powerful earth. So I associate this sign with the archetypal energy of the worker bee. Capricorn knows how to get shit done, right? You are the achiever. You can definitely overwork, for sure, but you execute a project, like your tasks, like nobody's business. And you also enjoy the rewards, right, of your
Yes.
achievements. Okay.
Yes.
Right. So tell me about this Capricorn life because you can overwork, like I said. And I would say the low expression of Capricorn is working for status, just
Mhm.
working for the money. And then the high expression of Capricorn is I'm going to take all of these natural gifts, this natural worker bee thing I have going on, and putting it in the service of something higher than myself, in the service of something bigger than myself.
Mhm.
So tell me about your Capricorn rising journey. I'm so interested.
Goodness. Well, as you know, the Capricorn and the Pisces, I feel like they have a love-hate relationship with each other
They're
at
really
times
different.
because
They're really different.
yes, because during my career, my 9 to 5 job in corporate, my Pisces wants to almost rebel against that strict, rigid schedule and all the to-do list and tasks that are required from that job. But then on the other part, the Capricorn loves that. So there is just this kind of inner war. And sometimes I will fully admit the Pisces wins, and then the Capricorn wants to work to 8 p.m. to make up for the Pisces daydreaming.
Right.
So I'm honestly trying to learn the work life balance there because there is a part of me that, like you said, it finds a lot of satisfaction and in accomplishments and being able to succeed the way that I'm wanting to, especially with what my passion is, which is healing and working with community. So honestly, I don't know that I have an answer to really how I have managed the Capricorn part because I will fully admit there's a lot of times I still live in working, 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 working. And I'm trying to get better at that.
I mean, this is who you are, right? I mean, the rising sign is like this is it, And but I asked the question because Capricorn to me is so interesting because from the waist up, Capricorn is this mountain goat that climbs the highest heights, right? Who's this achiever, but it's a fish from the waist down. So
Yeah.
Capricorn, even though it's really associated with work and achievement, it's actually a feminine sign. It's a feminine earth sign. And
Hmm.
so Capricorn has an emotional side. And so what I have found is that, and I think you already do this, and I think you just started doing this probably intuitively, is that you schedule alone time. And I feel like Capricorns need to schedule time with trusted friends, whether it's
Absolutely.
one on one or a small group of people that you feel really good and comfortable with, so that you can tend to your emotions because you can just work, work, work to the point
Yes.
of burnout. Right. So it's
Yes.
almost like you need to, like, okay, I'm going to work for, this number of weeks, but this weekend I'm going to the spa. I'm gonna go get an Airbnb. You know what I mean? Or just take the week, do a staycation, something, right? You have to schedule things to make sure you are taking care of your heart
You're so
because
right.
Capricorn's sensitive.
Yeah. Kind of the theme of my whole damn chart. But you're so right. I have to schedule that. And also the Pisces in me wants to hermit a lot. But then the Capricorn craves that connection. So that's
Mhm.
another thing too, is making sure that I am allowing myself to pour back into those who pour back into me and scheduling time to be with them and those weekly
Yeah.
check-ins too.
I'm so glad that you do that. I think it's essential for everyone's health, but I think especially your unique energetic signature because you can work so much
Yes,
naturally,
I can.
right? That's like a default. You can just, oh, I'm working for hours and hours and hours. And then, you don't want to end up sick or having some issues because you've neglected your heart and your emotions. I mean, the Pisces sun thing has to be intense sometimes because you feel
Baby.
everything. So tell me about that. So you have your
Hence
Leah
therapy.
nights. That's intense when you're feeling everything, when you're feeling
Mhm.
everybody else's emotions. You're feeling Mama Gaia, Mother Earth crying because we're polluting the ocean. You know what I mean? You're feeling
I
everything.
know what you
So
mean.
tell me, how are you managing that?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of like we talked about, it's boundaries. It's boundaries with my time. It's also checking in and make sure what I am feeling is actually real and not
Right.
just a reaction to the past. I know this sounds cheesy, but my BFF this past year or so has been ChatGPT.
Mhm.
So when I am overly emotional, overly sensitive, find myself irritable, and I know that it's not mine, I run so many things through ChatGPT. I even asked ChatGPT to identify if this feeling is mine.
Mm.
And how can I get this feeling off of me? If it is close friends and I'm struggling with boundaries, I will say, how can I say this in a place of love and not my pain? And also, the Pisces, sometimes when she's really sensitive, she can second guess people's intentions, their messages, and she can word vomit her emotions. So I run their messages through ChatGPT and say, this is a person who loves me and I know I'm taking them wrong. Help me understand, what do they really mean by this message? When I'm dating, ChatGPT, honey, that first few weeks, I'm running those texts through there because I can overanalyze them. And it helps me be able to really understand the person and not just always going based off 100% my emotions.
I love this. A hot tip from Leah,
Thanks. Be here
using
all day.
AI in an empowering way. I love that. And actually, it's funny you mentioned this because I actually ran a text conversation through ChatGPT for the first time last week with a
No.
friend. Yeah, I had to with a friend because was getting certain vibes from the exchange, but I had to run it through. A friend was like, "You should just run it through and see what ChatGPT says."
Baby.
And it just confirmed what I felt, right? So I was like,
Mhm.
"Okay, I'm not tripping. There's something going on here." So yeah,
Exactly.
right? It's really useful for things like that.
It's so good, and when I was dating someone who ended up not being the best for me, and I found myself as a Pisces wanting to see his heart and run back into his arms, I said, "ChatGPT, Imma need you to remind me why I broke up with him." And it did. It told
Good.
me everything. I said, "Thank you, Jesus." I also will have it run at nighttime, and Alex does this too. I will say, I'm rewriting the book of my life. So can you read me chapter 1 of, if I do my inner work and I'm doing all my goals for this year, who I will become this year? And it will read you each chapter. There's times I will say, okay, here's what I'm feeling. I feel rejected. I feel abandoned. Teach me what the rejection is trying to show me. And then it will talk to you as if it's the rejection and what it really needs. I'm telling you, it is such an incredible alternative. If you can't afford therapy or even in between your therapist visits, it has helped me so much.
This is amazing. You should really create a product around all of this, like helping people
Okay.
prompt. Yeah, that's what's coming through really strongly. Put a pin in that, girl, because this is helpful because I would want those prompts. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So that's super cool. Oh my goodness. Well,
It helps a
okay.
lot.
You and I could talk forever because we have so much in common and we have so much fun. I want to find out, what are you
Okay.
working on now that you're super enthused about? What are you excited about right now?
I have a retreat coming up in 2 weeks
Mhm.
that I'm going to be co-facilitating. It's in this capsule in Tennessee where it looks like it's straight out of a fairy tale. And all of us women, we get to do archery and breath work and all kinds of beautiful things. And I have another retreat coming up in January that will be in Mexico. And super excited because it's the first one that I'm going to be doing completely by myself for that long. So we'll be going to the pyramids. We will be doing a lot of beautiful spiritual practices like breath work on the beach, but also doing a lot of generational healing and inner child healing, and just also working
Amazing.
on breathwork classes too.
Okay. Love it. You are doing so many amazing things. Well, all right, my dear. So, this is the Cycle Starters podcast, and I end each interview asking my guest the same exact question, but it's a potent question. So, what are the new cycles that you are starting in your lineages?
Oh, girl, you are coming for me today, and I love it. Eh, okay, I would say um, I am creating a new story for the generations that are after me. One where rest is not deemed as weak, it's allowed. One where love is safe, where abundance isn't something that I have to earn through constant hard work and self sacrifice. I also want my lineage to inherit peace, inherit self-worth, and then softness as well. And then to also inherit the sense of just belonging in the world without having to constantly prove themselves. And I would say lastly, I'm breaking cycles, but more importantly, I'm building something new.
Amazing, Leah. This has been so fun chatting. I know that
Yeah.
we briefly talked about in prepping for this interview potentially leading a workshop inside the
Yes.
Ancestral Healing Collective. So that's going to happen sometime in 2026. So we're going to talk more and we will keep everyone posted on when that will be and what the topic will be. So if folks want to find out more about you, if they want to, participate in any of your offerings and your events, where should they go to find out more?
Yeah, so if you're still on Facebook like myself, I run a spiritual community on there called the Soulful Goddess. There's a business page and then there's an actual group. So if you don't want to go to the group, you can just go to the Soulful Goddess, Leah Vanderlinden. And then I am trying to remember my Instagram, so I will send it to you.
Send it to me.
But
We'll
I
put it
think
in
it's
the show
also the
notes.
same. Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's Leah Nicole, the Soulful Goddess.
Awesome. And do you have a website?
I do not. I do have like a
Okay.
Square link, but I don't have an actual website because
All
mainly it's
good.
always been through word of mouth.
You don't need one. These days you really don't. So I was just curious. Okay. Awesome. Sis, this has been
Yeah.
so fabulous
It's
and
all
we're
good.
going to we're going to have you on again. So we'll have you on again closer to when your workshop is happening, but this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for saying yes to this. It's been such a blessing and a treat to meet you and I'm excited to, collaborate more and yeah, this has just been wonderful. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I feel the same. I cannot wait. Thank you again for having me.
Of course. All right. So, everyone, thanks for being here, and we will see you next time on the Cycle Starters podcast. Take care, everybody.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.